iPhone XR review. That video is coming up right now. Let's go. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Welcome to my iPhone XR review. It's a very good smartphone. Beginning with the key specifications, the iPhone XR is rocking a 6.1-inch 1792 by 828 liquid retina display, a 12-megapixel single 2160p recording camera, 3 gigabytes of RAM, and an Apple A12 Bionic chipset. 2942 milliamp hour battery is on board here. Now, the iPhone XR's body build and design is kind of a mashup between the iPhone X series of phones as well as the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus series of devices. With an all-glass back, you do have now support for wireless charging if you're coming from anything lower than an iPhone 8. And it feels very premium. However, the aluminum sides are not quite as premium feeling as the iPhone X, XS, and XS Max, but some people do prefer aluminum over stainless steel. So if you do, you're gonna like the iPhone XR, but it kind of feels similar dating all the way back to the iPhone 6 along the edges. Now, the camera bump is decently thick. It's not too bad, but it's there, just so you know. And this is a little bit out of place. The lightning port, I noticed, is a little bit lower than the pentalobe screws, which you don't see typically. Apple usually keeps everything nice and streamlined and perfectly balanced. So that's just a little thing I noticed. It's not a big deal, but the microphone holes and speaker holes look very similar to the iPhone X of last year. Big power button along the right side for Siri and turning your device off, and along the left, we do see ourselves the volume rocker as well as the classic silent and mute switch that's been on the iPhone since its inception. So overall, on the top, you see nothing but, just straight up aluminum on the top. So there's nothing there. Very clean up at the top of the iPhone XR. So overall, while I don't think the iPhone XR has the perfect design ever on a smartphone, I do think it's a lot better for people that were looking for an iPhone in that $700 to $800 range than they had last year. For example, with the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, this phone feels like those phones are kind of old now when you compare it side by side. So definitely a nice option for iPhone users in this price point. And I do like the design overall of the XR. I think it can be improved on future versions, but this one is a pretty nice first step for that $800 to $900 price range for an iPhone. All right, so discussing the iPhone XR's display. So you will have to get used to the cutout on the display. It does cut into content just a little bit, especially in the reader mode, for example, but I don't think you should be worried about the overall quality of the panel. Yes, it doesn't have quite as good viewing angles as you'll find on other iPhones, but it's not bad at all. The whites are very white on the screen, and it's a really good LCD. You also have the inclusion of True Tone on this panel as well. It gets plenty bright enough, I think, for most users, and it's definitely not a disappointment. I don't think it's, super impressive, but it gets the job done. And having a phone with a $700 price point, it's definitely better than average. So most people can't even see a difference between this and 1080p. So one area where the notch does cut into content is when you zoom in, for example, you can see that the text is being hidden out of sight through the notch here. Okay, so one area where I find that the cutout does distract me a little bit, the notch here, is when I'm reading, for example, in reader mode on the internet, and I go ahead and pinch to zoom. You can see it does go into the cutout a little bit, but that's not really where it's effective. Usually you will read an article or something in portrait mode, and then the text starts cutting into the notch up there. Now, if you do read from the top down, this could affect you, but if you kind of keep your eyes centered on the middle of the screen and you read the content going downwards like this, it won't affect you at all. But I just want to make it known where the notch does come into the content. Another area is in photos. So if you pinch to zoom here, you can see that it will go into your photo a little bit. It's not really a big deal, but again, I'm just showing you where it does show, like, cut into your content. And lastly, if you are watching video right here, it will cut into the device as well. So the notch will cut into the content as well. And if you have things that are not centered in the middle, like videos not centered in the middle, sometimes things will, just cut into the content a little bit over here off to the right. So overall, don't worry too much about the resolution of the panel. It's actually pretty bright. It's a pretty solid display. I don't think you're gonna have too much of an issue. The display doesn't have 3D touch, so if you like 3D touch, you don't want this phone right here. And if you pull down, it does have haptic feedback, which you'll feel a little vibration in the background, but it's nowhere near as fast or premium feeling as 3D touch in my experience. The thing I do like about the display overall is that it's really close to those of the iPad as well as the iMac, because those use the LCD. So if you're using a MacBook computer and you use an iPhone XR, the display kind of matches and your eyes won't have to readjust or anything like to like an OLED screen, for example. So it definitely falls in line with their MacBook computers as well as their iPads, which also have LCD panels. Okay, so off to security and biometrics. The iPhone XR uses Face ID for the first time in an iPhone that's under $1,000. You go ahead and look at the phone and it will open. Now this does work in all lighting conditions, in the dark and not in the dark. However, there's no fingerprint scanner anymore, and there's no other way besides Face ID to unlock the phone besides a passcode or a password. So get used to that if you're going to be getting the iPhone XR. One thing that is nice about this phone is that if you're using your banking apps such as PayPal, for example, or financial apps like that, or anything that requires that security of Face ID to log in, you can authenticate with that, which definitely saves you time from having to remember and type in your password. Just make sure you save them in autofill. So it's a pretty nice touch here on iPhone XR to be able to authenticate like that. Okay, so in terms of software, this phone will be updated much longer than a lot of phones in its price range. With iOS on board, it's a grid of icons that is super smooth and has a really polished and very diverse app store with plenty of high quality apps developers consistently update. So you will have an extraordinary experience when it comes to app polish as well as apps on this operating system, and you will be getting updates way more often than Android competitors. The only Android competitor that really comes close is the Google Pixel series when it comes to the updates, but even that phone doesn't get updates as fast as the iPhone. So you can use Animojis now as well as Memojis. This is me right here. Doesn't really look too much like me, but I made them pretty quickly here. But you can go ahead and make your own face, and you can really get close to what you look like because there's a lot of ways to customize it. Also, Memoji here from the iPhone 10 series if you're into that. So those are some of the benefits you get with iOS 12 on the iPhone XR. Other than that, it's not really much different from any other iOS phone, just a bigger screen to operate with, and you do have to use gestures here to swipe through your applications, which by the way feel very natural and very smooth. You can use a swipe down to get to reachability. So there's not much more to go on with software. It's going to be updated quite frequently, and it's a pretty simple OS to use, and it's very locked down and secure. Okay, so in terms of performance, the A12 Bionic 7nm with 3 gigs of RAM, this phone is a beast, just like the iPhone XS and just like the iPhone XS Max. However, it's not really taking advantage of that power in iOS. It doesn't really need that much power. So what that means is that if you had an iPhone 8, an iPhone 7, 7 Plus, iPhone 10, this phone's not going to feel much difference in performance. You're just going to notice that it's just smooth and fast, just like any of your iPhones before it. However, knowing that you have that technology under hood reinsures you and gives you the peace of mind of knowing that your phone is going to last well into the future. So I'm very happy that they didn't shorthand us here on the A11 with the iPhone XR, and they gave us the A12 just like the iPhone XS and XS Max. That makes this phone much more compelling than it would have been if it had an Apple A11 CPU, even with a cheaper price. Okay, so let's talk about battery life, potentially my favorite aspect of the iPhone XR. This phone has been incredible when it comes to battery life, getting me longer than the 8 Plus, getting me longer than the XS, the XS Max. It's the best iPhone battery life I've ever had. And it reminds me a lot of the iPhone SE, which was pretty incredible for that size when it first came out. However, after several updates, Apple made the battery worse, it seems like, in the software. I don't know if they did that intentionally or the software was just bogging down the battery life. But this battery life is so good, in fact, on the iPhone XR that I'm a little nervous that in the future it might get worse with upcoming updates. So if it stays the way it does, I'm gonna be super happy. Very good battery life here. We're talking all day easily, potentially 2 days if you're a light user. People are finishing the days with numbers like 75%, 80% by the end of their day, which is insane. So the iPhone XR, very good battery life, thumbs up here. So let's talk about the camera. And the iPhone XR, using the same primary lens as the iPhone XS, gives it that same beautiful quality that you're gonna get on those smartphones. Blown away with the quality of this camera for this price point, because usually now you're gonna have to use about $1,000 to get yourself a camera like the XR does give you. Let's go into camera. You could see this phone can shoot in stereo sound, but the big difference here is the high dynamic range of Smart HDR, which combines multiple exposures to give you, through artificial intelligence, the best picture possible. And it does work pretty well, but one area where it even beats the Pixel series is the video recording capabilities are now up to 4K 60 here. You had this on the iPhone 8. But just having this here on the XR is great as well because you can record without any limits, unlike you were able to do on phones like the Galaxy S9 of this year, which introduced 4K 60 to their phone. So the video quality on here and the camera, I'm very impressed. As you can see, just look at the picture. You can see it right through the camera. I'm going to go ahead and show you some samples in just a moment. But before that, let's talk about the front camera. Okay, so the front camera, also pretty nice stuff here. We do have ourselves a 7 megapixel f2.2 32 millimeter lens here, 1080 up to 60 on the front camera. Now the thing is that even though the iPhones have always had rather low resolutions on the front, somehow their selfie pictures just kind of turn out really good, no matter the size of the megapixel count and all that. So that the iPhone XR is no different, and you also get portrait mode on the front of this device as well. Now, one thing about the iPhone XR you should keep in mind is that portrait mode does not work with objects. You can see right there, it's an object. It says no person detected. So if you do really care about that, you're not going to like the iPhone XR. Also, if you like a telephoto lens, you're not going to like the XR either. So if you like to zoom a lot or you like object detection photos, don't get the XR. But if you just want a really good primary camera, you'll love the device. Check out these samples and let me know your take on the XR.
Perfect.
Okay, so there's a tree right there. I'm actually going to flip the camera around and show you how the zoom quality looks on the XR, because remember, it doesn't have that 2x optical zoom. So let's check it out. Okay, so that tree right there is about 25 feet away or so. Now with the iPhone XS Max, you definitely can use that second lens to get some pretty good zoom shot. However, when you go with the XR, it's digital zoom. But in good lighting, you could see you can easily make out what that is, but the quality definitely falls off here from the zoom. So that's one negative I do find with the XR, but it's definitely not a deal breaker for this device. So let's talk about the audio performance. Again, no headphone jack. We don't even got to say that at this point. We know Apple's going the way away from that. But the audio from the phone itself is not bad. Let me turn it up to the max volume.
This year with the iPhone 10 and the XS can now
Cover up that speaker. You could still hear it. Cover that speaker at the bottom. Cover both, you can still hear it. So the external audio is very good as well. Also very strong Bluetooth connections with Bluetooth 5.0 on board here. It just makes the Bluetooth connection stronger, quicker, and more reliable. It connects very fast to devices. So pricing with the iPhone XR. If you haven't visited apple.com just yet, or you haven't looked into the pricing at all, it's going to start at $749 for the 64 gig, $799 for the 128 gig, which is the sweet spot, plenty of storage at only $50 more, and $899 for the all-out 256 gigabyte model, which is 4 times the capacity of the iPhone XR's starting price. So my overall take on the pricing is I think it's still slightly too high for people to think it's a bargain of a deal, because you got phones like the OnePlus 6T, for example, that are coming in the 500s. So yes, it's still slightly higher than, other phones, but it's nowhere near the $1,000 price tag of the XS and nowhere near the $1,100 price tag. I'm speaking from the US perspective of the iPhone XS Max. If you're in other countries, these could run you as high as $1,500 for a starting iPhone. So this one in some countries starts at $1,000. So it's not the cheapest one out there, but it's the cheapest of the newer design iPhones, which should be more accessible to more people. So call quality and connectivity, there hasn't been many issues at all to speak of with the 10R, and that's probably likely because the iPhone XS and XS Max had those issues before this did get released. Apple did have time to work on that. So there's no issues here I've had with drop calls. I don't have a SIM in because I don't like people calling me during reviews, but at the same time, no drop calls here for me on the 10R, and very good LTE performance on T-Mobile's network here in the US. That's the network I experienced it on. So should you buy the iPhone XR? Well, this is really going to come down to one thing mainly, and that is, do you like the iPhone XS and XS Max, but you don't want to pay the $1,000 for it? Then basically, yes, this is a very good smartphone. It doesn't really do much other than those phones do, and actually has a few drawbacks that those don't give you, such as, some could say the LCD screen. Some could say that the notch is not a fully perfect design just yet, but it offers a good value in between those two. And for being the cheapest iPhone you can get with this design, I think a lot of people will pick one up. However, a lot of reports are coming out that the iPhone XR is not selling as well as it could be, and that could be because of pressure from some Chinese phone makers like Xiaomi, for example, Huawei, with a lot of great offerings in the $200 to $300 price point. So yes, Apple definitely is not trying to play in that category. So this is a premium product you're getting right here. But some could argue that, well, it doesn't have that 1080p display. Well, this one's a really good LCD display, even if it's not 1080. So at the end of the day, pick up the iPhone XR if you never wanted to pay over $1,000 for a new iPhone, but you wanted that newer, modern looking design. If you do like OLED screens, but you still don't want to pay $1,000, consider getting last year's iPhone 10. Overall, with the 120 hertz touch sensing rate, the new design, the great cameras, the great battery lives, it's a very good smartphone. I think if you pick one up, you more than likely will be happy. In addition, having all these colors, which I didn't talk much about, only helps the matter, and having IP67 water resistant is great as well. If you guys found this video helpful, entertaining, informing, do me a favor, click that like button for me. If you're new here, consider subscribing for more. Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to be well, and peace.